Picture this: a freezing night, flashy suits, the bright lights of DC, and me, a guy who thought one good deed couldn't hurt. Turns out, that one moment of kindness pulled me into a mess where truth was buried under a broken system. And what happened next? Things got even worse. Let's start from the beginning. It was the kind of cold that cuts through layers, no matter how expensive your coat is. Barron Trump, all 18 years of him, stood outside a glitzy building in downtown DC, barely noticing the frost nipping at his fingers. The gala had just ended, and while everyone else rushed to their heated cars, he lingered, staring down the street like something was holding him back. Behind him, his father, Donald Trump, was deep in conversation with security. His mother, Melania, had already disappeared into the car, leaving Barron to his thoughts, or lack thereof. He didn't know why he was still standing there, but the heavy silence of the city seemed to pull him in. That's when he noticed the man. Across the street, slouched against a building, was a skinny guy in a ragged jacket that looked about as warm as paper. The man shivered, his hands trembling as he muttered under his breath. He looked like he'd been fighting the cold and life for way too long. Barron didn't think, he just crossed the street. "Hey, do you need help?" he asked, his voice unsure but steady enough to be heard over the wind. The man looked up, his eyes tired and sharp all at once. "Help? Kid, save your breath. I'm good." "You don't look good," Barron said bluntly. "Here, take this." Before the man could argue, Barron unzipped his oversized designer coat and held it out. The jacket, still fresh with the gala's logo on the sleeve, practically radiated luxury. The man hesitated, eyes darting between Barron and the coat. "This thing probably costs more than I made last year." "Maybe," Barron said, shrugging, "but it won't keep me any warmer than it'll keep you. Take it." Reluctantly, the man reached out and took the jacket. He pulled it on, his movement slow, like he didn't believe this was actually happening. But just as the moment settled, it shattered. A police car screeched to a stop nearby, its lights flashing blue and red. Two officers jumped out, their boots crunching on the icy sidewalk. "Hands up!" one of them barked, his tone sharp enough to cut through the cold. "What?" Barron turned, his heart racing. "That's him," the taller cop said, pointing at the man. "Suspect in a robbery." "Step aside, kid." "This is insane," Barron said, stepping in front of the man without thinking. "He didn't do anything." "Move," the cop snapped, pushing Barron aside like he was nothing more than an obstacle. The man didn't fight. He let them cuff him, his head bowed low. As they led him toward the car, he glanced back at Barron, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks, kid. You did more than you know." And then he was gone, leaving Barron standing there on the icy street, jacketless and stunned. As the flashing lights disappeared into the night, the next morning, Barron woke up feeling like his head was a spinning top that refused to stop. The house was its usual buzz of political chaos, staff running around, his dad on the phone about some bill that was huge, whatever that meant, and his mom talking schedules with her assistant. But Barron, he couldn't care less. His mind was stuck on the man from last night. Who was he? Why were the cops so quick to grab him? And most of all, why did it feel so wrong? Barron grabbed his laptop and dove in. He didn't even know where to start. Homeless man in DC wasn't exactly a winning search term. He combed through headlines, local forums, and even scrolled through hours of boring news clips. Nothing. Then inspiration hit, his social network. Barron reached out to a couple of friends who always seemed to know everything about everyone. If there was one thing rich kids were good at, it was being nosy. A few hours later, his phone buzzed. "Found him," the message read, the name, Julian Harris. 5 years ago, Julian wasn't sitting on freezing sidewalks. He was a sociology professor at a big-name university, the kind of guy you'd see on panels writing articles that got shared all over. But then came the scandal. Julian had exposed corruption in local government, big stuff, like stolen funds and shady deals. Instead of praise, he'd been slapped with lawsuits and accusations of defamation. His career crashed, and his life fell apart. Barron leaned back in his chair, the weight of the story hitting him. "That's so messed up," he muttered under his breath. The more he read, the angrier he got. This guy had tried to make the world better, and the system chewed him up and spit him out. Barron's fingers hovered over his keyboard. Could he do anything about this? That evening, Barron finally decided to bring it up at dinner. Timing wasn't perfect. His dad was busy talking about some new poll numbers, but he didn't care. "Mom, can I talk to you for a second?" Barron asked, his voice steady but urgent. Melania raised an eyebrow but nodded. "What's on your mind?" Barron took a deep breath and told her everything. The man, the jacket, the cops, and what he'd found out. At first, she looked skeptical. "Barron, you can't trust everything you read online," she said, her tone calm but dismissive. "I know, but this isn't just some random blog," he countered, pulling up an article on his phone. "Look at this. These are real court records, real reports. They destroyed his life, Mom, and now they're framing him for something else." Melania's expression softened as she read the screen. After a moment, she sighed. "All right," she said. "I'll help you reach out to someone, but don't get your hopes too high. These things are complicated." The next day, an attorney called with updates. They'd found Julian in a local jail, charged with robbing a convenience store. Apparently, he had stolen merchandise on him, the lawyer explained over the phone. "That's impossible," Barron shouted, jumping to his feet. "It's a setup." The lawyer sighed. "Without evidence, we can't do much. It's his word against theirs." Barron hung up, feeling like the walls were closing in. How could anyone believe this? Julian didn't even seem like the kind of guy to jaywalk, let alone rob a store. But then, something clicked. The cameras, Barron whispered to himself. The gala had been loaded with security cameras. If there was any chance to prove Julian hadn't done it, those tapes were his best shot. Barron grabbed his coat and headed out, a spark of determination lighting up his steps. Barron didn't waste a second. He marched into the manager's office of the gala building like he was on a mission, which, to be fair, he was. "Hi, I need access to your security footage," Barron said, trying to sound calm but failing miserably. The manager, a stout guy with a name tag that read Ted, looked at him like he'd just asked for the moon. "Sorry, kid, we can't just hand over footage to anyone who asks." "I'm not just anyone," Barron shot back. "This could help an innocent man, and, well, I'm sure you don't want to be the guy who said no to a Trump." Ted's skeptical expression melted into something that looked suspiciously like panic. "Give me a minute," he mumbled, disappearing into the back. It took what felt like forever, but eventually, Ted led Barron into a cramped room full of monitors and cables. The security feed was a mess, angles everywhere, timestamps flickering in the corners like a bad movie. "Good luck," Ted said, clearly not interested in hanging around. Barron dove in, scrolling through hours of footage. The images blurred together, people coming and going, cars pulling up, and a whole lot of nothing. His eyes burned, but he kept going. And then he saw it. There was Julian, sitting on the cold sidewalk in his threadbare coat. A few minutes later, Barron appeared, handing over his own jacket. It was all there, the proof that Julian hadn't stolen anything, that he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Barron's heart raced as he copied the clip onto a USB drive. "Got you," he whispered, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. The next day, Barron handed the footage to the attorney. The man's eyebrows shot up as he watched it. "This changes everything," the lawyer said. The legal team filed for an immediate review of Julian's case. Meanwhile, the story leaked. Within hours, it was everywhere. Social media exploded. Half the internet hailed Barron as a hero, while the other half accused him of staging the whole thing for attention. "Rich kid plays savior," one comment read. "Barron Trump actually did something decent? Didn't see that coming," said another. Barron didn't care about the noise. He had bigger things to focus on. The courtroom was packed. The attorney presented the footage, and the atmosphere shifted. Even the prosecutor looked uneasy as the video played. "This clearly demonstrates that my client was not involved in any theft," the lawyer declared. "The charges against him are baseless." Julian sat silently, his eyes locked on the screen. The judge ruled in his favor, dropping all charges. Julian was free. Barron felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. Outside the courthouse, Julian turned to Barron. "They didn't lock me up over a jacket," he said, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. "They locked me up because I wouldn't shut up about things they didn't want to hear." Barron froze. He'd known things were bad, but hearing it spelled out hit differently. For the first time, he saw how deep the cracks in the system ran. As the crowd dispersed, Julian put a hand on Barron's shoulder. "You did good, kid," he said, his voice softer now. "You've got power. Use it. Not just for me, for people like me." Barron nodded, a sense of purpose settling over him. This wasn't just a win for Julian, it was a wake-up call for him. As they parted ways, Julian's words stuck with him. "You'll make it work, kid. We'll make it work." And for the first time, Barron believed it. What would you do if you were in Barron's shoes? Would you step up and try to help someone who's been wronged, even if it meant going against the odds? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know ever faced a similar situation? Don't forget to like this story if it resonated with you, and let's start a conversation about standing up for justice. This story was created to shine a light on real-world issues and inspire positive change. Your opinion matters, and together we can make the world a better place.